Pick your favorite book, like a book that no one could ever convince you that it is not an amazing book. You just like categorically love the book. Okay. Go on Amazon and like read some of the 1-star reviews about that book. And you will not be like, wait, the author, you're right. It's a bad book. The author is wrong. The author should feel so insecure. Like you'll read these reviews and you'll be like, this reviewer is an idiot. Like, what did they think this book was? Like, what are they talking about? They're out of their minds. And then when like bring that mentality to your own books, like, because then when we get it, you get a 1-star review on your own book, you're like, oh my God, like I've screwed up. My whole world's unraveling. It's over. Like they've seen me to the core. Oh no. But actually it's like, wait, like who are they? They just read the wrong book. They thought it was different. Like, I don't know. Like they wanted you to write something else and you didn't. Like that's on them. Like it's fine. Sometimes it can help build a bit of perspective. It's a price of success that some people hate your stuff. That's all right. We are at the hour, so let us begin. So many books, so many projects start out too big because like it seems so clean when it's first an idea in your head, right? You go, oh, it's just this. And then as you start writing it, it just unfurls and unfolds, and you realize it's got all these edges and edge cases and loose ends and and it's like, oh man, there's a lot here. I think sometimes I come across where it's like everything needs to be designed and decided perfectly in advance, which definitely isn't my intention. It's like any product design, there's going to be an iterative process where you kind of make a set of guesses or hopes or decisions. But then you try and you go, oh, wait, this part's way bigger. It needs to be a separate thing. Or this part's small, and it's like, so it's a bit of design and a bit of discovery. And I think it serves us well to go into the process with that mindset. It's too big of a project to see every detail of it right from the beginning. So Atomic Habits is an interesting one. I kind of shy away from using it as an example because it's like the most successful nonfiction book of all time. So it feels so cherry picked, but there are some really interesting things about it. From like an imposter syndrome or self-doubt, or is this a big enough innovation? He says quite plainly in the book, under one of the framework images where he goes, hey, this all comes from these other authors. My contribution is this little square here. He's super upfront about that. There's like a long history of research. This bit is my contribution. I've put it all together for you. That's awesome. And no one's like, wait a minute, this isn't your original research. You're a fraud. They're like, no, thank you for bringing this together. And like, I've read all 3 of the big habit books, right? Tiny Habits, The Power of Habit, and Atomic Habits. Those are the big 3. And Atomic Habits has outsold the others by an order of magnitude. And when you read them all, you can see why, right? Because he's really done the work of making it easy to action. And so I love that. It's like, you don't have to invent everything. You want some contribution, but your contribution can be that you have more empathy for a certain type of reader than anyone else. That was kind of the approach of my first book. It wasn't new knowledge, but I was able to take the knowledge and translate it with empathy for a certain type of reader who'd previously been poorly served. So my contribution was like reframing it or putting it in a worldview lens that they could use. You can do it by bringing stuff together. You can do it with original research. You can do it with clarity. You can do it with a new spin or a contribution. There's lots of ways. I think there does need to be something, but maybe it doesn't need to be as much as we tend to believe. But you don't want to we talked to Marty Kagan once, who wrote a couple brilliant books about product management. And he said that one of the mistakes he sees with authors is they'll read 3 books about a topic, get real excited, and then write a book that summarizes those 3 books. And he's like, that's not enough. You haven't where's the value, right? Where's like your view as the author? Where's your edge? Where's that special something? So you need some of it, but not as much as we fear. So a big topic made small and useful. I mean, the one that's jumping to mind, and I'll open this up to others if someone else has a better example, but I'm thinking of Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. That's a pretty big topic, right? It's like about purpose, it's about life. But that's a book where you see people in a moment where you're like, oh, you need this book. I don't know how he did it. Like that's one that I would push more toward like the art genius side of the spectrum, as opposed to like the product side of the spectrum. But I don't know, like one way I think about it is, as a reader, when you finish reading a book, like say you read an academic book or you read a pop science or pop psych book or something, there's an amount of work that you as the reader need to do after reading that book to be able to put it into practice. You have to like look through it and go, okay, what's my plan for learning this? What's my plan for implementing this? Usefulness is just about doing some of that work on behalf of the reader as the author. So almost any topic, if you look at it, no matter how lofty it is, it's like what work does the reader need to do to like you take this away and do something with it, to implement it, to make better decisions, to have a better worldview. If you can do a bit more of that, then it's become a bit more useful. And it's not a binary all or nothing thing. And the early rounds of beta reading, the way I think about them is you're trying to find the next book killing problem. That's it. Not every problem, just the next big problem. And then your next revision is fixing that one big book killing problem. And then you bring in a few new people. Hopefully they get past that and they find the next problem. And like you fix that. So you're usually not revising the whole book. Like the book killing problem might be in chapter 1. And so you only have to revise that bit. And then people are getting past it and you find the next one. So the early rounds tend to be pretty quick because you just, they stop reading pretty quickly because that's the nature of early manuscripts. And then you iterate until they're getting to the end. And then the book's getting better and your beta reading rounds are getting slower because the revisions are taking longer because people are getting through more of the book. I do not like to watch the feedback as it comes in. I like to ignore it for like a week or 2 weeks and then look at it. Because I find if I'm looking at it as it comes in, I'm overvaluing and over-identifying with individual comments in a way that is not necessarily healthy. And there's all sorts of reasons why people would get busy and stop reading, even if they were on a roll. There's all sorts of reasons why people would be having a bad day, or it's like the wrong book for them, and they're just needlessly mean. And something about seeing them live, it's like, I don't know, it drives me crazy. It gets under my skin. So I like to keep a bit of distance. Then I come back and then there's enough where like the individual weird comment or one reader, it doesn't affect me as much. And I can see it with a little more perspective. So some of the things I'm looking for on the good side, I want to see where they found something really valuable, especially the first thing that they found really valuable. I want to know how quickly that comes in. And I might try to pull that value sooner if I can. Then I'm also looking for where, again, not individual readers, but in aggregate, I'm looking to see, is there a big drop-off in engagement in a particular place? So for me, if I had 4 people going through and leaving lots of comments, and then the comments kind of slow down and then stop, and that all happens between chapter 2 and 3, I'm like, there's something going on there. Like one person, coincidence. But if that's the data in aggregate, and so then what that's going to do is that's going to direct my attention for the next revision. I'm going to go, okay, somewhere around here is the 80-20 problem where I want to be spending my time to try to solve this engagement issue. I was actually looking at some of my old beta reader data for a lesson that's coming up. And there was a section where I just had a whole, like almost a page or 2 pages of text, and it was just solid blue, which is the color that confusion shows up as when people mark it as confusing. And I looked at it, or slow or something. I looked at it and I was like, oh yeah, I just deleted that whole chunk from like later versions. That was a change where, and I remember writing it and I was so proud of writing it. I'm like, yeah, this is so compelling. It's so well. The readers were like, this kind of sucks. I was like, huh, you're right. I just deleted the whole thing. So stuff like that is useful, the individual comments, but early on, I'm more interested. I'm like, it's the trends as well. So it's possible to learn from almost anyone something. You don't want only experts because then you don't get like your reader feedback, but having some experts in there can be great. Like when I was doing the workshop, the education book, we had a lot of expert readers in addition to our real readers. And it was great. They'd say, oh, you've presented this idea as if it's the truth, but it's actually just your style. And I'd be like, oh, you're right. How do you do it? And they'd tell me. And then I'd either be like, this is my style, or I'd be like, here's 3 different ways of doing it. So I found that helpful, but the experts can help, but they won't tell you if it's desirable and they won't tell you if it's effective usually because they're not actually using the book. They're just kind of reading through it. But still, they're great. And Marty Kagan, actually, since we mentioned him earlier, he actually starts with an expert reader and he sends his manuscripts first to this single trusted expert who basically does a super deep read. And then after that, once it passes the expert, then he does the beta reading with mass market. I do it differently. I start beta reading and personally I bring in the experts a little later, but there's something to learn. There's just not a replacement. And sometimes in my data, what I will do is if I realize there's one person who's just, I don't know, they hate everything or they're like nitpicking it's like something's weird about it, right? I'll try to look through just their comments and try to understand where they're coming from. And if I decide they're coming from a place that is just not my reader, I'll just delete all of their comments. And I'm still grateful for them. They spent time. It's like, thank you. It was my bad for like bringing in the wrong person. But ultimately, I don't want those comments I don't want like data from a non-reader to convince me to go in that direction just because it's emotionally compelling. So I'm just going to get them out of my site, just delete all, and the exception would be if someone finds it offensive or it's factually incorrect, something like that. Obviously, I'm going to fix those things, but I'm not going to let my non-readers write my book for me. So at a glance, I saw you had 7 readers in there leaving data. So that's a decent number. How long has it been out? How long have they had access to it? A week. Okay. So some authors like to nudge people. They go, hey, this round of beta reading is open for 1 more week. If you still want to leave comments, it's awesome, but you've already helped so much. Thank you. So they remind without pressuring. Because if you pressure, you end up biasing your own data because your people follow through out of guilt. But if you can leave a gentle reminder, some people are like, oh yeah, I did mean to go back to that. Fine. That can be part of it. There's a natural drop off with beta reading. So you're never going to get 100% to the end. I've seen a really healthy ratio is 50% reaching the end would be great. So you a steady decline through the chapters down to 50%, just because there's some churn inherent in it being an online tool. And people's lives are distracted. The physicality of a book reminds you to pick it back up. It appears on your Kindle. You see it on your bedside table. It's you're reminded to return to it. With a digital version, which beta reading always is, you don't have that reminder. So there's some natural churn to be expected. So you're not going to get 100%, but you want, half of them is great. So what I'd be doing there is also, if you can look at the specific area, that was like a cliff, right? Almost all of the engagement stopped at the same place. If that's a couple people, so I'd look, is it one person leaving all those comments? That would change it. But say it's it's the bulk of the people leaving a steady stream of comments, then they all stop. Either the final chapter before they stop feels like hard work. So they reach the end of that chapter and they're like, whoo, I'm tired. I'll come back later. But then they don't, because life gets crazy. Or the next chapter feels like the way the next chapter is promised or presented or opened, they're like, I don't think that's for me right now. So it could be the desirability of the next chapter or the hard workiness of the first chapter, or it could, if it's a small group of people, it could be noise. So it's a bit like teasing that apart. But I'd be looking around the cliff, the chapter before and the chapter at, and be like, is there something here? If I look at this through the eyes of the readers, what might be causing them to drop off here? And you tweak it, and then you invite a few more people, and you see if that fixed the issue and people get a bit further. So developmental editors are very much in the manuscript with you. When I was working with my developmental editor for my second book, I don't always use one, but I have, and I enjoyed it. I'd be like, wow, I am at a total dead end here. I've been rewriting this chapter for a week and I feel like I'm getting nowhere, and I would send it over with my thoughts. He or she would read it. We'd have a talk. We'd be talking. We'd be brainstorming, how do we restructure this? Is my understanding of the problem what I think it is? Which is very different from what you would get with a copy editor or proofreader later, where you're basically never talking to them directly. They're just making suggestions on the doc. So what I would be looking for is you're actually looking for a bit of personality fit with a developmental editor, because it's someone that you want almost like a coaching or a product design relationship with, where you can go back and forth and hash that out. That's the soft side. And then the other piece is, if you are strongly opinionated about your tools and writing process and workflow, and especially beta reading, you will want to make sure that they are willing to fit into your process. Because a lot of editors are, let's say, not tech savvy, and they came out of a very enterprise MS Word, send me the PDF, send me the file through email, and I'll send you the file back as a new version. That style of working drives me crazy. I want to work, I want version control. I want us to be in the document together, collaborating on it. So I felt strongly about that. So when I put out the call, I said, I am writing with Google Docs. You will have to do your editing in Google Docs. You cannot download it and then re-upload it later as a Word file. And you would be amazed, 80% of the developmental editors I talked to, that just immediately disqualified them. Because they're like, I will not do this. And eventually Adam, who's in the community, who runs the Wednesday writing group, he was like, I will do it the way you want, but it's going to make me slower because I'm not in my comfort tools, which is going to make it more expensive for you. And I was like, I am totally fine with that, because we are going to save so much time by using a sensible process. And the other thing I insisted on is I'm also doing beta reading. So there's going to be times where we're looking at the data together, or I bring you the data and we talk about what it means and we work that in to the next plan for the next revision. Are you cool with that? And he's like, oh yeah, I've never worked that way before, but happy to try it. So to me, those are the two things. One is the communication collaboration side, and the other is, are they going to fit into whatever workflow you feel comfortable with for your book? And that's it. I don't know. Um, I've never written a memoir. My readers actually tell me they wish there was more of my story in my books at places. Because they sometimes one feedback I get from people who like my books, they say I like the book, but I feel like I didn't get to know you as an author. So people think I'm like too far in the not including story direction, which is fair. To me, it's like a stylistic thing. Whatever. This is how I'm comfortable, so that's what I'll do. Um, there are examples though, like Man's Search for Meaning, which we mentioned earlier, has a lot of biographical stuff. Something like Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins, which sold 10 million copies or something. It's 90% memoir. There's a bunch of examples like this. Some of the writing books, War of Art, Bird by Bird, The Artist's Way, all of these are they're mixed, where it's like half autobiographical, kind of memoir about stages of their lives, and then the other half is pulling in stories and examples of other people who they've helped or heard from, or stories of others. Um, in some genres, it seems to work really well, like in addiction recovery, like alcoholism, or other addictions. There's this genre called quit lit, like quitting literature, whatever, where it's people are buying it for a purpose. They're buying it as because they want to be reminded, like to quit, to stay quitting, to keep going, to do the thing. So they're reading these books as they quit to like keep themselves on the straight and narrow. And those are incredibly autobiographical. Some of them do more like try to pull out exercises and lessons, but some don't. But people are buying them because they want that inspiring story at that moment. They want like the story of the struggle and the success and the camaraderie. So like some of them, they're just story, but they're still being consumed in that way. That feels a little bit unique to that genre and use case, but it can certainly work. Another one I'm thinking, just to pull on a different genre, there was a book by a fellow named Tony Fadell named called Build. Tony was kind of like the product designer behind the iPhone, and then there was some drama with Johnny Ive, and he's sort of anyway. Now Johnny gets all the credit, but this fellow Fadell, he did that. He did the Nest thermostat, which was really successful, and he wrote. Well, it's a business book, right? It's about how to build consumer hardware products, but it's wildly memoir-y, like autobiographical. But like, if someone was wanting to build that category of business, it is absolutely the book I would recommend. And he does a couple things, like each chapter starts with a typographically different section, where he basically is like, here are the principles at play and the lesson, and then he switches typography and he like tells his story. But since he started with the principles, it feels like his story is the supporting evidence for the paragraph of principles that he starts each chapter with. It was quite effective, I thought. To me, there's like listening and learning conversations, and then there's like teaching and coaching conversations, or becoming the book. So the listening and learning conversations, it's anyone, honestly, like when I was doing Write Useful Books, I would talk to anyone who had anything to do with books, right? Like publishing industry, this, that. I was trying to get perspectives. And out of some of them, I got like quotes or examples that I used in the books. Out of some of them, I was just like, that's a dead end. Don't need to talk to more of those people. And it helped like push me into the direction I did care about. Um, with the teaching and coaching, with kind of becoming the book, like, does this advice work? Uh, so there, I'd be trying to think of like a specific person that. So for example, one of the books I considered writing once was kind of entrepreneurial advice for teenagers, like to start their first little like side business, to make a profitable hobby as a teenager or a kid. And when I sit down to think, I'm like, who's that's sounds great in the abstract, entrepreneurial kids, let's go. But then I sit down, and I'm like, who's the person who needs to learn that? Well, in the village where I live, there's a Dutch family, and they've got a super sharp kid named Robert, and he's 14. He's like got an interest. I'm like, if I wanted to write that book, I need to go help Robert, like that kid. I need to help him do it. Um, and I need to find like a couple other specific people, and like, who are they, right? And in like kind of identifying that and being like, okay, let me like help out this person. Then it's also clear to me, what do I need to write first? Like what's the advice? What's the level of detail? What's the tone? What's like the tough love versus the encouragement? Like, what do they already know and believe? And when I started writing Write Useful Books, the person I was helping was a friend of mine in Barcelona named Veronica. And Veronica was like, Rob, I need help on my book. Like, tell me what to do. And I was like, oh, okay, let me help you. It was like her. And so then when I think of that profile, that informed a lot of the book grew out of that decision. It, she's business savvy. She's like tech savvy. She understands product. She's confident. She knows what her topic is. She knows what she's writing about. That's not like a persona I made up. That's a real person. And like we sat down and we had coffee and I tried to help her. And the stuff I said to her in that meeting is in the book. That's like the foundations of the book. And there was stuff I said to her that didn't work or she wouldn't try. And that's just not in the book. So to me, that's how I remove the abstraction. It's like at some point I get to the people and like if someone's trying to have a better relationship with digital technology and well-being and stuff, like is it the person who's like doing the ayahuasca ceremony and they're already out at the edge and they're doing the morning discos with smoothies and like is it that person or is it the like stressed out office worker who's like wants to stop yelling at their kids when they get home because they're so like frazzled? Like depending on which of those people you sit down with and try to help, like that's going to really change everything, right? Like listening and learning is open. The other one is like who do I want to help? And for that personally, I don't do that off market research. I do that off like who do I care about? And who am I going to be happy spending this time with? Because you're going to keep having contact with them, and that if you do care, that makes it into the book. And people can feel that warmth and that sincerity. So there is one other approach that I should mention. It's not my style, but I guess it works and people do it, which is kind of what do they call it? Like fly your freak flag or something. Like you plant the flag. You're basically like, this is what it is. Screw you. You start doing your thing, whatever your thing is, right? You make the art, you trust your instincts, you follow your voice, but you do that in a way that people can see. So like you put it out there. This was done in fiction. Andy Weir, who wrote The Martian, which sold a bajillion copies and became an awesome Matt Damon movie. It's weird. It's like really like engineering, technical sci-fi, and it's like written from like a first person journaly perspective. And it's like, it's a weird book. And when he started writing it, that's like, he was putting it out as like on these fiction websites, chapter by chapter, section by section. And he's just like, this is what it is. And enough people loved what it was. He sort of, he didn't decide on the person and then write it for them. He like wrote in his way, very straightforwardly and unabashedly. But then he did that in a way that the right people could see and they could gather around him and they were able to like to follow along. And then by the time he launched, he had this massive following and the publishers had seen the momentum and he got a great publishing deal and they gave it a huge boost and all that stuff. And that's similar to the way Nassim Nicholas Taleb talks about writing his books. He wrote Anti-Fragile and Black Swan and Fooled by Randomness. He said that none of the publishers would talk to him because his terms was like, I want to write literary nonfiction about finance and I will not listen to the editors. So like, you can't edit me. Like, and the publishers were like, you're a first time author. There's no way we're agreeing to this. This is ridiculous. Like no one's going to buy these books. These are terrible. And, after Amazon came out, he was able to find like a startup publisher who gave him like the worst deal ever, but he was like, fine, we can distribute it. He like planted that flag, right? He's like, this is what I'm doing. And then he did that in a way that those people could gather. So that's totally fine. That's like the art piece approach. It's super hit or miss, but like it can hit and it can hit big, right? And so if you feel like the kind of figure it all out in advance approach is too constraining or it's not a good fit for the material or your style or whatever, then I'd say like, is there a way that you can plant it as a flag and lean more into showing the work or writing in public so that you can draw the right people to it and kind of write what you want to write? Knowing various, like I used to have a friend who ran a chiropractic practice. I cannot tell you how often he mentioned his newsletter because it was frustrating him. It was one of these things that everyone he talked to told him he should do it. Every book he read told him he should do it. He was trying to figure out marketing. It kept coming up and he's like, one, it sucks to do. Two, it's not working even when I do it. Like, this is awful. Like, and so like a recommendation trigger doesn't need to be fancy or clever to work. One of the reasons Atomic Habits is so strong is because the recommendation trigger happens constantly. Anytime anyone wants to make any change, it is possible to recommend Atomic Habits as the solution. That's like the world's greatest recommendation trigger. It doesn't need to be fancy. Like the trigger for the mom test is someone complaining about a bad customer conversation. But what that does is the trigger tells you the emotional state when they're picking up your book. So think about these two different like triggers as a starting point for the book you write. One is they've already tried to do the newsletter thing and they hate it and it sucks, right? You can kind of pick a fight with the people saying it's easy, just write a newsletter, it's so easy, like, oh yeah. It's like you can pick a fight with that and be like, no, there's stuff to get right. Like this is hard. Like it takes time. It's an investment. It's worth, like, you can position yourself against that. And you can assume some knowledge of the basics because that person has already heard the basics from someone else. And the basics aren't working for them. So it's your job to like tell them why not and draw a comparison and put them on the right path for whatever reason, because it's more time efficient, it's more authentic, it's more systematized, like whatever your insight is. Okay, so that's like the complaining about it trigger. A different trigger would be, it's like, oh, I've heard this is a good idea. Should I do it? Like, or, oh, I'm starting a business. Like, how should I do my marketing? And it's like, hey, if you're starting a practice, this is a thing you should think about. Let me tell you why newsletters are great and how to get started. That person, well, one, like, feels like a way weaker trigger, just like saying it. It feels less common and also less urgent. So that just feels weaker. But assuming like that person, when they pick up the book, they're like, wait, so why does this matter? How does it work? Which tools? Like that book starts in a very different place with a very different tone. So the trigger is not meant to it's not meant to restrict you. You're not meant to be like, oh, it has to be exactly right or no one else will ever buy the book. But it's telling you like the emotional moment like that they're in. It's giving you their context or their backdrop so that you can start your book in a way that really matches how they're feeling and what they need and what they were saying that led this book to be recommended, right? My book about customer meetings basically assumes that they've had like 50 terrible customer meetings. And so to start by acknowledging that, it's like everyone told you to do this and it is really hard and it sucks and it's not working, right? They're like, yes, finally they feel seen and heard, right? And then they're like, this author gets me. And then from there, I'm like, here's what you're doing wrong. And they're like, oh my gosh, why is no one like, and we're off to the races. So that's the point. It's just to like, to give you that context on them and to make that decision. How do I start? How do I talk to them? It just tells you everything, right? Like which example should you use? Like talk to people who are pissed off, like get their stories about being pissed off. And then like, like that's awesome. Your reader's going to love hearing that. And then like, talk to them about like what made the difference. Like, why is it working now? This thing that used to suck so, it's like, boom, there's like your examples, right? Because you go into it and if you don't know, if you haven't thought about this stuff, you go into it and you're like, gosh, I need an example about newsletters. It could be anything. It's like, where do you start? Which do you pick? Like, it's impossible. And so by narrowing it down, you're like, oh, it should obviously be this. Okay, on to the next thing. You just make your job easier by making some of these sharp choices is the idea. And then if you realize it's not working, in your beta reading or whatever, or you're writing, you're like, wait, I don't care about these people. Like, okay, revisions. That's why books have revisions. Knowing who your reader is allows you to be empathetic for your reader. If your reader is everyone, you can't be empathetic toward them and you can't design a product that's tailored for, because it's too big. That being said, just because it's specific doesn't mean it needs to be small. Like specific can be a worldview. Like specific can be like jobs suck, like dead end jobs, like dead end careers, like it sucks. Like why? Or like that can be a worldview. You can target that. That's like a lot of people. So it needs to be specific, but not small, right? And you can get that specificity by slicing it in any number of ways, which is, hopefully we've talked about through this module. There are some options. One is to put them in the appendix and have like a big appendix, which is like advanced topics or like expert applications, stuff like that. I did this in the workshop survival guide where there's probably 50 pages in the appendix, which was originally chapters. It was like 5 chapters in the book and they were too advanced. And so it was breaking the reader experience in the flow. And so instead of telling people these are advanced, just skip ahead, like that never works. Instead, I pulled them out to the end. And then in the main text, I said, by the way, there's more of these. If you're advanced, they're in the appendix. And that worked, I think, well enough. I don't know. Like people get to the end. And then if they want to keep going, fine. Something else that's worth considering is, so a lot of your book reviews will come from Kindle. So Kindle accounts for 25% of book purchases, but the majority of the book reviews, the ratings. And the reason is, if you're reading a paperback, you have to go put down the paperback, open your computer, and like type in the thing and go rate it, right? Kindle, it pops up as soon as you reach the end of the main body. And it's like, how was the book? How many stars? So it's really helpful for building your early reviews, right? Now, on Kindle, one interesting twist is that doesn't pop up on the final page. That pops up on the final page, like it pops up before the appendix starts. So what you want ideally is like, if people are going to drop off, you want them dropping off in the appendix. That way they get the little review pop up first. You don't want like 5 difficult chapters at the end of the book, but before the back matter, because then it prevents that review pop. It prevents them getting to the review pop up, you know? So that's kind of a dumb tactical optimization. I try not to focus on that stuff too much, but it's, I don't know, that one feels important and it's so easy. It's just like appendix. The other option is that you pull that stuff out of the book, but you use it as your marketing material and your thought leadership material. And you use it to like guest post on other experts' blogs to talk about the book, or you use it as like a thing to podcast with, or as the script for a conference talk you give, that sort of thing. It's not quite as interesting, but yeah, those are some options. So, approximately how many reviews does it have? Do you know? Okay, so the rule of thumb with reviews, this is an average, and there's pretty wide variance, but it's about 2.5%. It's 40 to 1 on copies sold to reviews given or ratings given on Amazon. Again, pretty wide average, or like a lot of variance in this, but as a rule of thumb. So someone getting like 1,000 reviews is something like 40,000 books sold, approximately. So this book you're talking about is like 600 reviews, 700 reviews. That's like, I don't know, 20,000, 30,000 copies sold. It may be the biggest in the category, but that is by no means a category owner. Like it is not, it's not like what I would consider, because mostly with a competitive book or a seemingly competitive book, my advice is going to be ignore it. However, there's one important choice, which is, do I make the assumption that all of my readers have already read the other book? In which case, you're going to take what the other book said as like assumed knowledge, and you can either build on top of it or disagree with it and pick a fight in certain ways. So with the mom test, the like 1,000-pound gorilla, or however much the gorilla is supposed to weigh, in my category was a book by Steve Blank called 4 Steps to the Epiphany. And he was the inventor of customer development, and my book was about customer development. So I just assumed that everyone that was reading my book was already familiar with his. Like if they hadn't read it, they at least knew all of the ideas from it. And I also assumed that they'd already read Lean Startup or were familiar from the ideas. And so I was just like, I'm assuming you already know this stuff. Let's build on top of it. Totally fine. The other option is like, I'm going to assume you don't know anything, and we're going to like just start from scratch, like, you know, from wherever you are. Like that's the only decision. But 600 reviews, 700 reviews is the biggest, but it's not a category owner. So it's like, yeah, you could easily, you know, compete with that directly. Well, not easily. I mean, that's still, you know, it's hard. Like it's hard, but it's doable. And also, people like buy multiple books on the same topic. It's weird, but they do. Like I'm always seeing my book recommended alongside other books. And I'm like, you really don't need to read both of those. But for some reason, people do, and they like to. I don't know. It's fine. We're so paranoid as authors. We're like, they will never read 2 books on this topic. But I don't know. People do. I'm very pragmatic. Like if you find it helpful and it allows you to move forward, like then great, you know. If you feel like it's making you more confused or like running you in circles, then like stop doing it. But yeah, if you find that it's giving you some direction, great. The caution, like sometimes with low star reviews, it's clearly someone just like bought the wrong book or they wanted it to be a different book. Like there's a book about startup management. What You Do Is Who You Are by Horowitz. He's like giving management advice, but with these lovely like historical stories and stuff. A bunch of his 1-star reviews are from historians who are pissed off that he missed some detail of a story. Like, and like to me, that's not useful feedback, right? It's like they heard that their pet historical figure was in a popular book and they went and read it and they're like, you don't know everything. I wrote a PhD about this person. So like that to me is just like noise. Just ignore it, right? But yeah, if it's like legitimate grievance, like great. And what I really love, I'm really into the data behind inaction. Like I call it like the non-consumption data. So if someone wants to start meditating or they want to get healthy, I'm really interested in the books they read that didn't work and why it didn't work. I'm interested in like the things they tried to do like the advice they tried to follow that they weren't able to keep up with or they didn't get results from. I'm really interested in like the failure case of good intentions because often that reveals like a bug in the way the advice was given or in the way like the book was structured or something. I'm like, ooh, like that is solvable through like better product design, right? Through better book design. So I am interested in that. I did a lot like with Wub. I would talk to people. They'd be like, "Ah, I'd love to write a book someday." I'm like, "Have you ever tried?" They're like, "Yeah, I tried once." I'm like, "Why didn't it work? Like, what did you read? Like, where did you get stuck? Where did you give up?" I'm very interested in that signal, and maybe that sounds similar to what you might be able to tease out of a low star review in some cases. Okay, sorry I ran late again. That's my fault. I ramble, but it was a pleasure seeing everybody. If you have extra questions you think of in 5 minutes, just post them to the forum and we will try to help you out that way. See you soon and happy writing.